Welcome to part two of our series on configuration management databases. I'm Gideon van Zyl, and I am a person who have been dealing with configuration management databases for a couple of decades. So I have some insights into it, and I hope to share that with you, and I hope it's meaningful to you. So in this specific episode, what we're going to do is we're going to look at from a high level why on earth we want to have a configuration management database. We'll also look at how we want to consume the information from the CMDB. So, which applications have use of the data that's living in there? Which departments, which individuals, which personas have use of the data that's living in the configuration management database? The image that you just saw there is an image that was generated by an AI application. And what I asked it is I asked it to represent for me a CMDB. And it created this very, very interesting image. And I really like it. The CMDB is effectively a representation of the architecture of your environment with multiple parts and relationships which is connected to each other in order to be able to provide the services to the population. And so that is a really, really cool image that I like. And I have a few others of those that I have generated and just for the fun of it. But I think that kind of gives us an idea of why we want one. So CMDB is basically a representation of your environment, your technical environment, the information that you are using within IT, how they relate to each other and what they've got. So its first purpose and its primary purpose is to act as a catalog of IT stuff. So the what of that is pretty much to say what the thing is, what other things it relates to within the architecture, what it consists of, data, does it have memory, what all else does it have internally to it, what its purpose is, and then also what its important is. So I could say, for instance, hang on, if this component breaks, then this is a highly critical component for us. If this breaks, it's a nightmare. So I could also define attributes which are related to its importance within the business. Then also from a people perspective, I can also define who it belongs to, um, who must act when there is something that goes wrong. So I could add some attributes to the configuration management item, which is living in the configuration management database, that describes the people and the departments that surround it. Also important where it's located. Now, if I'm living in a physical environment and I, for instance, want to go and do an audit of something or whatever the case might be, and it's located in site B, and I go to site A to go and look for it, I won't find it there. Uh, it if I'm trying to repair something which is located in New Zealand, and I think that this thing is in the UK, I'm not going to be able to find it anywhere in the UK. This is an important aspect, and that is to create a template which provides a consistent library for the definitions of the attributes of these things. Now, these in the old days, we used to do what we call site files. And what site files were is that for every system that we had a file, and that file had all kinds of information about the system. Now, we use the template, and the reason why I use the template is because there would be consistency. So the template that's created would be for the specific class of item, but it will also be functional for the applications that we want to support with it. Now, another dimension that you want to look at is to be able to understand what happened to IT stuff in the past. Now, this is really, really important. It's really powerful because your configuration management database doesn't only allow you to be able to have all the information and contain all the information of the current state, but you could also link that information to stuff that happened in the past. Now, in the service now configuration management database, all kinds of events are associated with objects that are in the configuration management database. So you can see, for instance, the history of changes. You can see the history of incidents. You can see the history of alerts that took place. So, in other words, it allows you to understand what changed, what went wrong, what was fixed, and what was replaced, which is really cool because that means that you can actually go and see uh, a history. And if somebody asks you the information, you can find that information in the configuration management database. Really powerful stuff. Then also the aspects around who did it. So who repaired it, who moved it, who deployed it. So if there is an issue, for instance, with a change and something goes wrong, that you're not left stranded, that you can go and see, oh, well, this change was implemented by this and this team, and that team went and they had John who went there and implemented the change. So you've got a question about that, then you can also get answers to that, which just really makes it nice because it brings the complete ecosphere of the who, the what, the where, and the the tools that was used and all the other information together. Then, of course, why it went wrong. Now, this is sitting at a slightly different space in the sense that the configuration management database will also have through platforms that consume the information would be able to understand why did it go wrong as part of the incident update, why it was moved, which is a part of the motivation for change, or why it was replaced. So it provides you with linkages to the important information in the processes in order to be able to understand the stuff that happened to that specific CI or to that specific service. And then also important when it was deployed, when it was commissioned, when it broke, when it changed, when it relocated. So, for instance, you can go and create a linkage between the change that took place last night at 5 o'clock, and then all of a sudden at 6 o'clock, when people started logging in, or 7 o'clock when people started logging in, they had problems. So there's a correlation on the CI between the actual changes that took place and the people or the incidents that were logged shortly after that. So you can go and find timeline information in there. Now, then there's also the future. So CMDB also allows us to go and plan stuff that will happen in the future. What is planned for the future of this thing? What changes are in place for this specific thing? What's the impact? So, in other words, uh, if this specific object is changed, what will be affected by that specific thing? And then who made the changes or who will make the changes? Who will relocate it? So, in other words, when you have a question around, let's say, for instance, uh, I'm updating some software. Now I'm picking up that there's a change that's located or that's been logged against a specific CI. I can understand that in the future there will be a change. This is when that specific change is planned. And this is the person who will be going and doing the change. So I can follow up with them, give them a call and say, listen, I see that you have a change in on such and such a date. Are you going to update the database as well, or what are you planning to update? Because we have some database changes that we want to roll out. Maybe we want to join those together and we want to roll them up as part of the same change. So it allows you to do better planning. And then also, it allows you to have a timeline of how things have changed or how things are changing over a period of time. So let me use an example. I want to go and fix something because I'm getting XYZ error. Now, I might be new in the team, or we might have a new division, or we might be wanting to do something else with the system. Now, if I have that information, I can go and see the history of it, and I can see how these things that happen on this. Or, for instance, I have a specific device, and this device keeps on giving problems. I'm able to understand the timeline of that. So I can see that, hang on, this thing, every month, this thing goes bad, and it goes bad in a big way. Now I can actually start understanding the timeline and the history of that, but then also project that into the future. So I might be wanting to do my planning to say, well, you know, all the routers of XYZ type, we want to actually go and replace those ones. Why? Because they have been giving us errors, and we can have a clear history of this. We can see which model has been giving us, or alternatively, we can say, well, but what we want to do is we want to go, and there's a later patch that has been released for that, and we want to go and update that patch, update that routers, those routers with that specific patch. We have already now looked at why we need a CMDB. Now, in this section, we want to look at what consumes a CMDB and who consumes a CMDB. Those are two critical questions because those will determine how we want to present that information and what would be the appropriate information that's required in order to be able to build a CMDB. Now, let's start with the what. Nearly everything in IT and in automated businesses consume information from a CMDB or a CMDB like repository of data. So by that we mean, for instance, your ITSM processes. Now, if we talk about CMDB, as we have mentioned before, CMDB is the name that's mostly used by the ITSM processes and the ITIL background, but also by DevOps processes. So DevOps also have repositories that contain data. And if we can centralize that data, like for instance, the name of packages, etc., we can influence change on that and we can manage how those things are being deployed and have a history of what happened to that in one centralized location, which is really useful. Then also site reliability management processes. For site reliability management, in other words, to understand what is going on with a site being a collection of information, probably in the cloud or somewhere like that, it's important to have the correct information, the data available in a repository where it can be looked up, where it can be utilized, and where it can be reused. And then for IT operations, the same. So if there's an event that's taking place and something that's going wrong within the world, and that specific event is related to a specific item or a specific logical entity, you want to be able to understand what that is and what the impact of that is. When it comes to the financial department, I can get into trouble quite easily because there are many traditionalists who consider that the financial information of the environment, of the infrastructure, should typically actually be part of your asset management space. And I think that is fine. But with the advent of cloud and the large consumption or the large usage of cloud within organizations, what has happened is that we have been exposed more and more to consumption based billing and to consumption based usage. And that is interesting because virtual entities and virtual devices are not classically handled by a typical asset management platform. So, what do we do? Now, in this place, I'll contend, first of all, that from a historical perspective, if we consider a configuration management database to be all about the stuff that's in there and they kind of have their fixed allocation and financial information doesn't form part of that, we still need to know what information relates to what devices. Now, in cloud, when we are spinning up services in cloud and when we're modernizing our environment and doing all those kind of things, we end up with stuff like cloud databases. We end up with virtual machines that are being consumed that has no asset value. We are dealing with things like cloud load balancers. We are dealing with all these entities that does not fit into a classical model where you have a piece of tin which is devaluated, and therefore it cannot quite comfortably fit into the asset management space. But the information that is required concerning those specific virtual or logical devices is just as important for the financial department as if it was a physical piece of tin. Why? Because there's money involved in it. Now, there's ways that you can go and reconcile it, but the key of it remains that you still want the key information, what it is, how it relates to each other, all the other important information, and how that relates to services contained in your configuration management database. Now, in the other platform that I've been referring to, OnePane, what OnePane is doing is they're actually relating the financial information directly to it. So, in other words, it's not just a CMDB; it's a CMDB plus some of the capability that you would normally have in separate application that consumes that information. So you would be able to, in that case, be able to understand what the running cost or the consumption is of any of the objects that you have in the cloud real time as you go and view it, which is a different way of approaching it. But just consider that for the financial department, you still want the core information, even if you have another application which is extracting the financial information, because you must tie the two together. You must tie the object that is the thing that we are discovering that's in your configuration management database, and the financial information. We want to tie that together, whether it is sitting in the same platform or whether it's sitting in another platform. You still need some common form of reference for that in order to be able to do that calculation. And then the next layer of that is building the services which those specific objects make up, those cloud objects or those cloud entities or the cloud resources make up. You also want to still be able to aggregate those costs to the service so that you can understand how much does the service cost us, not just the various objects. So you could then start saying, well, within the organization, I want to do billing, a financial departmental issue. I want to be able to do billing of the various cost centers that I have within my organization, but therefore I need to be able to have a correlation between the service, which contains the cost center and all the other information that's important for billing, and how that relates to all the various objects that make up that service in the cloud environment. So you can see that very important information for the organization, but also in the legacy environment. So if I have a service which is made up of multiple things, those multiple things I want to tie together in a service. Why? So that the consumption of the service can be billed internally by the financial department to the various departments that exist within the organization and have physical tin or whatever that might cost and how I'm going to slice and dice that. I still need a common reference that can show to me how the service that is being provided to the customer is made up of the various components with the associated costs. So that's a very important aspect which is quite often missed and which in CMDBs classically is a little bit confusing. It doesn't quite come together. So yeah, important thing there. But then also people. Everybody from your chief financial officer to developers can utilize this information or consume it in some way or another, either through an application which is consuming the information for them or alternatively directly. So, for instance, the CFO. We already spoke about consumption based billing. When we're looking at cloud based information, the CFO would really probably be interested in how we can reduce the costs of cloud consumption. Or when there's planning that's being made for new stuff to be deployed, what would the impact of that be on the bottom line of the organization? Being able to do analysis, like saying, well, if we were running something in the production environment before and it was based on tin, what would the factors be in the future for being able to determine what that could be based on use cases that we already have in existence? The CIO. This is very important for the CIO as well, because for the CIO's measurements and the way that the CIO is being measured and the things that the CIO wants to know is about the services that's being provided to the customers of IT. But there's all kinds of layers of information that's important to them, like how many services do we offer? What's the reliability information of services? What is the costs associated to services being offered? For business service manager, what's the uptime of my system? If there is something that is in my system which is breaking, is this reoccurring so that we have system reliability issues? All the information can be connected together through the configuration management database and create meaningful content for the business service manager on a platform or on a number of platforms based around the actual architecture and the actual stuff that exists within your infrastructure. And then, of course, IT operations manager. What's the impact of a change? Somebody's coming and they want to make a change to the environment. We have a critical time between X and Y for that specific business service which is being offered. And are there changes that have actually been put into place in order to be able to upgrade something or modify something or modernize something? How does that impact on the IT operations manager? For developers, I have developed XYZ. How reliable is it? Or something is going wrong. Why is that? Is it my code? Is it not my code? What are the impacts of uh, uh, of a change potentially on other changes, or what is the impact of changes on my changes that I want to introduce? And then platform engineers being able to restore the service as quickly as possible, ensuring that the services run as well as possible, and being able to understand what the impact is when they have to restore services. And then finally, call center operators. Now, when there's automated calls being logged or when people are calling them, they do want to understand what the relationship is between the, the technical events that took place and what's happening to them on their side. How is it impacting on them that there is some or other database that's down somewhere? Now, that information is not necessarily available to them directly or through the knowledge and the experience that they have, but could be available to them from the system to say that, oh, we have a severity one issue which is impacting upon a specific database, which is impacting upon the business service or the service that these people are calling me about. Well, that was our introduction to CMDB. I know that we have not covered all aspects of a configuration management database. Hopefully, as we go on through this series, we can answer some questions if people feel that we have missed something. And in this specific section, what we have done is we've covered why we want the CMDB, and we have covered who and what consumes configuration management databases. In our next delivery of the series, we will have a look at actually building something and what the things are that we want to have in place before we build it. Following on that, we will also have a next episode which will look at how do we maintain a configuration management database. Now, this will be much more practical and it'll be much more hands-on. So for me, on my side, it'll be more interesting to create the content, and I won't just be a talking head here showing you some slides and telling you what's busy going on. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that is meaningful to you. Please subscribe and send me an email if you want to. My email is gideon@gideonfundsale.co.za, and you can also reach me on my LinkedIn profile. You can find my LinkedIn profile or subscribe to this channel so that you would be able to see new episodes that's coming out in the future. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.